Hi, my name is Emily and I'm with Yesterday's Stash. And today I'm going to be talking about some of the projects that I've been working on here of late. Embroidering, hand embroidering is one of, but mostly I've been working on little things. So I've been practicing various hand embroidering, stitching, using different, like this is one strand of embroidery floss, and I've been doing some like putting the veins in the flowers or in the leaves, and here's an example of one that I've gotten finished. Just trying to bring some personality into greenery, and I have just acquired this book, and it has different stitches and how they're done. Um, it's pretty self-explanatory. I think a picture's worth 1,000. You can get so much understanding from the pictures. Of course, it tells you where to bring it up and to bring it down, and it has the little like ABC, go up here at A and down here at B and up at C and so forth. So it's been helpful, and so I have been doing a lot of practicing. I practiced on some the just muslin, and I've been using size 24 needles, embroidery needles. With this one, however, I am using a even smaller size needle than that, because the point is, tapestry needles have a blunter point than, say, needles that we might use for, say, hemming a dress, or something like that. And then I took some fabric that had this is a kind of a linen-y, and it has big pieces of, it had, the big piece of fabric had a lot of openings like this in between. And so what I've been doing is taking some of that fabric and cutting it up so that I'm working with smaller pieces. And I put lines right here so that I could practice doing, say, a cross stitch, or what they call a twill or herringbone stitch. And on that I've been using 3 strands. One of the things that I learned when I was teaching home ec some years back is that when the students would try, I would try to teach hand embroidery. For instance, in a child development unit, we might make a bib, and the students would learn how to do and one of the do a stitch. And so one of the things that the students said that their grandmother had taught them, and I had never done this before, but you take a tiny skinny piece of paper, and you stick the 3 strands in here, and then the needle, because it has a larger eye, you can scoot the needle through, and you don't have to lick on. And one of the things I tried to get the students not to do was to lick their projects, or lick the papers. And so they found, let me try another piece. That one seems to not work too good. So the students found this to be very helpful, particularly with the larger eye needles, and it worked for them. So just a plain piece of paper, and then what they told me that I had never done this before is to tie this up here at the end, so that just one time, and they said, my grandma taught me how to do that. And then, of course, how to, go like this and squeeze it off and have yourself a little knot at the end. and the knots don't have to be really big. And then, for instance, I found a piece of this is Aida cloth, or Aida cloth, however you pronounce it, and it was supposed to be, you know, for putting a design down here and making like a bookmark out of cross stitching, but and so I've been practicing stitches using the cross stitching, and that, you know, so just tiny little flowers or tiny little motifs that can be used in the junk journals. And here's an example of some that I have done with, you know, just using a tiny little, and you can put that, and it can be an adornment on here's one where I started to make pink flowers, and I've just made the stem, and I'm going to work on putting some flowers on it. And this is using that, what we used to call the candle wick stitch, but the candle wicking is, you know, where you take and do this little French knot. Some people call it a French knot. And then this is using a particular stitch where you just go out and then come back in. And there's a stitch called the chain stitch, and well, I don't know if you would, yeah, I guess it is called chain stitch here. But what you do is you take and you start here and you go up, and then you go around, and when you go around you come down and have the end of the flower be here. And so I've been practicing on that. Here's an example of a flower, and just drawing different patterns. And you can use tracing paper to do that, and just taking pieces of pretty paper and just doing some stitching around the leaves and or the flowers. And here's an example of one that I did with using, it's just little purple miniature flowers, and you go up through here, and then you put this here, and to do the what I call the candle wicking stitch, or the French knot, you do like that, and then you hold on to it and push it through, and it makes a little raised space for kind of like a little polka dot space for these flowers, and just gives a little. It's not like you have to do extreme projects to get something, you know, like that done. And another thing that I've been working on is I found a picture in a book about how you can take, and I had some large safety pins, and this I am making, you know, I took some kind of trim. The thrift store that I went to had just beautiful pieces of trim that would be good on upholstery, and so I took some of that, and I did different things to it. This was wide enough, just like it was, and I started with just a little piece of muslin, and I stitched it across here, so that you're actually pinning it onto the project like that. And then you come down here and you do various things to get, for instance, if this was, I wanted just a real tiny little square, then you just come in here and do this and stitch across, and then you have a tiny little motif that you could put a button on, or something, you know, like that. And an example of that is right here, where I took a flower from from a doily, and then this is a prima flower, and it looks like my center is off center, but you get the idea. I took two pieces of fabric and put them together like that and frayed them, and then it turned out really, really nice. So here's another one that I did, and I just did a square stitch around it, and sort of you can see how it's done here. That one I actually put an interfacing on, but you don't really, don't really have to because you've got the thickness. So with tiny little motifs or little embellishments that have, for instance, this is tissue paper and an embroidery strip. This is a piece of, well, I can't say the name of this right now for some reason. And then I just sewed a piece of lace on it, and then did some, I sewed lace on both sides of it. Jute, I guess you would call it. This is some pieces of just fabric, and I put a little bit of lace on it, and sewed some buttons on it. And here's one that is another really pretty piece of embroidery, and I actually put a piece of lace on it, and then I put one of these, so I'll probably dangle something from that. And I only have this through the lace, so I had to put an extra thickener on this side, and I'll probably need to glue it right here so that it won't come through. So it's great to be able to do this using all sorts of things, strips of trim, fabric, lace, buttons, all sorts of things. And so I've been using those designs, or trying to use up some of the trim by putting them on the safety pins like this. And another thing that I've been working on is taking and doing some hand embroidering. I took 2 pieces of muslin, and then this is actually a kind of a packing film that I got. I actually got chocolate in it, and it was wrapped in that. It's real thin, so you can find thin batting, and if you wanted to have that sort of have a little bit of a quilting pattern come from it, then, and that's what I did, was I took and put that sort of batting in between, did some hand stitching, just did straight stitching. This is actually a piece of fabric that I pulled off. I took a big tablecloth that had a lot of stains in it, and it had this particular motif throughout and I just thought that would be great. So I am practicing. The blanket stitch is probably the easiest one that I know, and then I put a little piece of fabric that I can burn on the end, lace, and a button. Now, I don't have a way to attach this yet. That's one of the things that I did with some of these, is I added a way to attach it. But again, I would probably want to put a little bit of glue around it. And then you can put either a ribbon, or you can put a bulb pin. And then this is what I used stays on, and had a piece of muslin and pink ink stays on, and put a saying on there, and stays on is permanent, so it will work. And then this is sort of a puffiness, and I did a zigzag stitch on it. And then here's one that I actually did a sort of a circular embroidery around here, and an actual little flower motif. This one here, what have I done here? I actually did a, just did a random quilting stitch, very thin, have put a flower here, a little bit of lace, and a paper with some scripted writing on it. Oh, and then what I was going to do with this is actually I was going to take a safety pin or a pin that was long, probably a safety pin, and I was going to run it through and make it one of those. You can take paper, and I put some glitter on the paper, and put some stitching on, complementary kind of dark purple stitching, and then on the back, so I need to put some sort of probably right here I will put where you can, and then some of these you actually may just want to glue them to a page. For instance, this is sort of plain. I haven't done anything much to it. I have already put this on it, but you can actually take and put one side, glue one side down, and you just use it as a corner embellishment on the corner or around the edge of a page. And here's another one where I actually just did some practicing of that particular stitch, which turned out really, really pretty. And then I just added one of these store-bought bows, and I will be finding something to put on that. So all of those were like squares or rectangles, and these are all hearts. And this is where I did some hand embroidering after I did a zigzag stitch, and you can sort of see the edge of the fabric has that real thin batting on it. And I haven't done anything to this, but you can tell that it kind of has, I could do, a random stitch, or I could do an embroidery stitch, or I could take, for instance, one of my little motifs, if I wanted to, and, stick it on here. I would probably need to trim it down or put something else on it, but you get the idea. This is where I actually took some of that ribbon trim and put that on there, and I actually used gold thread to go around the edge of this to give it a little bit of a a different look. And then I just took a plain heart pattern, and this is Aida cloth, or Aida cloth, however you pronounce it. It's a really large, and you can't see the little holes in between as easily with this type of Aida cloth, because it's for a much larger pattern, much smaller than the little bookmark that I showed you. And just put some trim on it any way that I could, just doing some random hearts with different fabrics that I have. And this is where you actually, I know it's whoops, that one came out, but this is a what we would call a I don't know what kind of a stitch this is, but you run it underneath, and then you tie a knot, and it has a little bit. And then this one is actually where I did the same thing on this side. You just run a little bit of thread underneath and tie it, but you do need to tie it tight because some of mine are coming off. And then, or just hang something from it. This is that burlap. Actually, I can now say burlap. But what I did was, instead of, so this I did on both sides. I did the stitching on both sides, but on some of them, before I even stitched both sides, I did a design. And if I wanted to put a design, say on this one, you can just take and go underneath this particular layer of fabric and not go to the other side. So this was flat. I just put an interfacing here, and then an iron-on, or maybe this was heat and bond. I just put a piece of doily or lace, and then did a little collaging right there. So those are some things that can be done for little pieces, and doing the, so I just started with a bunch of these out of these were some of the first ones I did, so my blanket stitch doesn't look very good. And I had to go through and do several before I could figure out what would work well. And just all kinds of different different stitches. And also I went online to try to find pictures of embroidery stitches and printed them out so that I could get an idea of how some of them look. I like that side feather, and this is a fern. And then the stitch I was talking about that you do with the, by putting, it's not on here. So this doesn't have all of the stitches. The one I was talking about, that where you take it and you go underneath, say the beginning of the flower, and then you come up, and when you go down, you loop. So I guess they looped right here to get that to work. And then other, just whatever you can find that has pictures that will make sense for you to make your, and then once you get your little squares or your little pieces done, you can do all kinds of little, either hand, practicing, and this is 2 hearts. I didn't do any stitching on this one, I just glued them. But just, a whole lot can be done. And then this is an actual piece of cardboard that I did some sponging. I actually took medium gel, and I put some of my ink from, this is, I think it's something grape. It's the Ranger ink, distressed ink or alcohol ink. And then I just sewed this on here to match it. And then on the back, I actually put a place where you could put a picture or do some sort of decor. So here's where I am with some of them, just at the very beginning, trying to refine that stitch. And some of it I'll probably have to pull out. This is where I got into circles, and circles are another interesting thing to work with. And this is, I just took the bottom of a jar lid and made circles, and then I put lace, I put paper, I put just a random design out of a trim that I had. I did a hand embroidery stitch on these. And then, just put regular little small collaging kinds of things. This is one that has a very decorative stitch on the outside that I could do something with. This I actually put a netting film in between, which I'll need to glue that down better. But it kind of gives it a different look. So taking all of the same same fabric and just doing an assortment of things with them, adding little adornments, it really worked well. But what I did was I started with this kind of, I cut out the shapes, and then I put that little batting in between, and then pinned them together, and that's what I used to do some of the hand stitching on, or some of the machine stitching on it. And then I went with a diamond shape, and I did just some, these are those French knots and a trim and a cross, just a cross stitch. But all of these little bits could be really neat attached to a pocket or attached to a page, or can be used in a lot of different ways. So it does take some practice, and it does take, but when you're watching TV, taking your embroidery floss and taking your bits of your different fabrics, or your just finding little bits of fabric. It's a great way to use little bits of fabric and little pieces of muslin that come up. So just letting ideas flow and coming up with different things to do with these. It's just been a lot of fun. to come up with different designs and different ways of doing these. So yeah, thank you for watching. Again, my name is Emily. I'm with Yesterday's Stash. That's my Etsy store. And this has just been a wonderful journey. I've just really enjoyed coming up with different ways to use little bits to adorn pages in junk journals. So we'll talk again soon, and thanks for watching.